Hi, I'm Peggy with Potato Patch Nutrition, here to do another question and answer session. This one took a really interesting turn actually, and I'm just going to read the question and then kind of go over what this owner and I discussed both on a phone call and then also over email to get to the conclusion that was made. And she starts by telling me her show mare's name, but so our show mare, her titers for EPM just came back at 168. Curious if you think she should be treated. She has been unsound off and on. That's why we tested, because all the x-rays came back with no evidence of any issues. She's only 5 and my daughter's show horse. I am just at a loss on what to do. Of course, I went down a rabbit hole in researching this. So I actually asked her to give me a call, because 168 is actually very low. It's actually a very positive number for in terms of the titers. And titers, essentially what they tell you is that the immune system has seen something and has dealt with it. It's prepared for it. Should it come back around, 168 is low. 250 is actually an acceptable titer for something such as EPM. And when it gets up in the 1,000 ranges, then obviously treatment is needed. But at 168, I felt very comfortable that that was probably not the issue. And not really knowing where the mare was unsound or what that looked like, I spent the last 35 or more years training horses. And so you develop an eye to be able to see where and what is actually ailing the horse. And so I actually asked her to send me some video also. And she had front foot x-rays. So it was determined that the mare is actually unsound in the front, and that is actually much different than what she was envisioning. So, and these type of things take some time to understand. And the mare essentially has what I would call up-down feet. So one heel that is low and then one heel that is high. And the way that starts very simply is, as a baby, they'll split their feet apart to eat, especially if they're in a stall situation or at some time when they are in a stall situation. Generally in the pasture, because they're walking and loading and unloading both feet, they don't normally pick a dominant foot in the pasture to keep forward and then the other one to keep back as they eat. But the shorter back, longer legged horses also have a shorter neck. And so they have to put their feet further apart in order to graze or to eat, say, hay off of the barn floor. And it's usually in a stall when they're eating hay on the barn floor that this will start to develop. And it's simply because the foot that's forward, the weight is on the heel. And the foot that's back, the weight is suspended off of the heel. And so where the suspension is, there's going to be growth. That heel's going to grow. And where there's pressure or a cutting off of the blood flow because of the pressure forward, that heel is going to crush. And so very simply, that is how it actually starts. It's not actually normal. If they were just in a normal pasture situation all the time, they generally would have pretty similar heels. Now, horses that have been stalled enough to have a significant change from heel to heel, they will walk around the pasture and almost always keep the low heel forward because it's more comfortable. And I'm going to show why here in just a minute. I'm also going to go over, because this is going to be more geared towards the pleasure industry. Those of us who have to maintain a top line, meaning the top line is going to be below the withers rather than what would be naturally above the withers. And I'll show a couple of videos about what I mean, like what's actually natural. And with a natural headset where the body is at probably about 15% of an incline, the neck and head are from the wither, the lower heel isn't really going to affect the horse that much. It's actually when the head is lowered that low heel is going to become an uncomfortable problem. And what actually develops in the deep flexor tendon and within the tendon sheaths is what I would refer to as carpal tunnel, which if you've ever had carpal tunnel from typing or you've had sciatica, then you understand how painful that is. And quite honestly, anti-inflammatories are not as effective as you'd like them to be, because tendons have very, very little blood flow, especially when there's inflammation, because tendon sheaths do not expand. And so they constrict. The more swelling there is within the tendon, then the less blood flow and electrical current can actually process through them, which is how the horse heals, is from that blood flow and electrical current. And so it's very difficult if they swell and the tendon sheath is going to hold them in place, to be able to really heal without some assistance. It can take a very long time, like up to a year, for proper healing to take place. And so a couple of things that I will go over sort of as disclaimers before we get really far into this is I am a fan of injecting the carpal canal, but not until x-rays and proper angles of the low heel can be established, specifically because if you take away the pain and the horse overextends or overworks that low heel, then you can have like deep digital tear strains and or tears. And so that's something that you want to avoid. And if a carpal tunnel injection is not something that your vet is familiar with, because without it, it can be very difficult if the horse has gone to the place where they trip or the leg buckles forward. And I'll see if I can't find a video where you'll see a buckle, maybe in a baby that's a little bit tight, because that's pretty natural or pretty normal. This video is definitely going to be more geared towards the performance horses who have to go at a declined top line. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, we're going to start at a regular trot. And one thing I would say is they look sticky. They don't necessarily look really unsound. We're going to slow it down a little bit. One of the things that I look for is the motion of the nose, which I did take the rider out of this so that you could just see the legs. But when the rider turns loose of the nose is going to go up and down. And to me, that will always indicate the leg that hurts. So she tries to go up. This right front is the one that is a little more uncomfortable. It doesn't go as far back behind the body. And even as she travels, you can see that heel and that hairline are not the same if you were to stop it as the other foot. At the lope is where you're really going to see the biggest difference in a low heel. And what you want to watch is that outside right front foot and how the body moves as it hits the ground and leaves the ground. There's a lot of motion, a lot of play in the top line. There a lot of rocking, and you'll see this. It's pretty common. Where on the side, when she lopes the other way, it won't be like that. The other thing that I see is that there's a lot of scooping of the dirt and throwing it behind her from that right front. It snaps forward off the ground, much like the buckling that you saw with the video of the baby that I slowed down. So we're going to go back and we're going to compare that then to the other side. This side is steadier. The body is steadier. The head is steadier. There's a lot less fussing with the reins, less fussing with the mouth. Head and neck are just more comfortable. It's obvious that it's more comfortable. She stands up off that outside front. She pushes it away from her. She doesn't scoop as much dirt as she does the other way. It's the entire stride is more comfortable for her. So we'll go back and look at this again because it's helpful to compare it back and forth several times. And if you can take a video of your horse and slow it down, it will tell you quite a bit. But she actually has to use the weight of her body and her neck in order to lock up and leave the ground with that right front. Where this left front, she can actually use the whole shoulder and the muscles to just push it away from her. So that's the biggest difference that you're going to see. It won't necessarily be limping. It will just be the difference sometimes in the comfort that the rider feels, the top line, and how it performs and how it moves. And it's really not her fault. X-rays. This is the right front. And this is the leg that actually is bothering this mare the most. And a couple of things that I see right away on this X-ray are this kind of shadowy line through here, and that is the deep flexor tendon. And I'm going to show a diagram in a minute of the deep flexor tendon and actually of all the tendons in the front leg. But the thing, this is a farrier view. This would be called a palmar angle view of from the side of the horse's foot. And what we're really looking for essentially is this line right here. And I feel like, honestly, for me, it says it's a plus 55. For me, this is more of a negative 55 because it's not really at the point and it's kind of cutting off some of this stuff that I can see below this line. So for me, that's probably a little bit of a negative. It's at least probably a 0. But in this particular one, it's considered a plus 0.5, which is half. What you really want to see is a +3 to a +5 on most hunt seat, Western pleasure, performance horses. And when that is below a 3 to a 5, then what you're going to have is no blood flow down the back of this foot. And I'm going to show you what blood flow is actually does look like here in just a minute. Whoops. Hello. Hi. Okay, so a couple of things to know. If your horse has a low heel or low heels, and it is very common for horses to have one heel that is lower than the other, partly because we have bred them to be shorter and shorter backed, but we've also kept some of the length of the leg. In a balanced horse, a horse that lopes pretty, the neck and the back are going to be of a similar length. But then if the legs are longer than the neck and back, the horse is going to have to split its legs further and further apart. And the further apart the legs get, then the more of this low heel, high heel that you're going to see, because as one leg is dominantly put forward, especially in a stall situation, they're going to crush this heel simply by standing on it with it extended in front of the bait, and they'll eat next to that leg. The other leg, because it's behind the body, behind the shoulder, that heel is going to look like this, because this heel is extended, so there's a lot of blood flow behind that heel when they're eating, and so the blood flow here is going to create a lot more what this stuff down here, which is what we call digital cushion. And that digital cushion, this foot's a +5, and I actually personally, if I had measured it, would have measured closer to the toe, so it probably is legitimately just a +5. So this is a beautiful foot. I like the way this bone column lines up. If you look from here all the way down through, there's a nice load all the way through the center of the bottom of the foot. In fact, let's go back to the other one and let's look at the load on that foot. So looking at the load on this foot, if you start here and you come straight down through that bone column, you're ending up back here, right over this deep flexor tendon, which is a great deal of crimping of a hose, essentially. So that blood vessels and stuff that run down there, there's a crimping of that. And so all of the blood's going to be pushed this way or this way, back up the leg. So first of all, this is a lot of pressure. Whoops. Put right here. A lot of pressure coming straight down that like that. Let's go back to the other one and let's just compare a little bit. So see how lovely it is? I mean, we're talking like right down the center line, right in the middle of the foot. Now for me personally, she could have a little less toe. I like for the point from here to here to be the same length as from here to here. And I would like to see that toe back a little further. And actually the next pictures that I'm going to show you of this mare's feet after they've been reset, this farrier actually did a pretty lovely job. So that's what to know about palmar angles. This is lovely. The right one is not. Then the next thing to know when you're doing your farrier reviews is it level from side to side? And you can see from here to here is a longer distance from here to here. That is going to also contribute to a horse being sore. And as you can see, the center of this bone column does not load in a straight line. So it's more like this, sitting at an angle. Can you see that? So it's sitting more like this. If you just look down, it's not like this. That would be a straight line. This is not a straight line. That is going to also cause some pretty significant soreness in the feet, ankles, and shoulders, especially, I mean, pretty much from the bottom all the way to the top. Let's look at the left one. I think it's the other way. I apologize. Okay, so this one is a little bit more level, but still the distance from here to here is greater than the distance from here to here. It's a really good idea to go ahead and get regular x-rays and making sure that all of these joints line up. You can see that that they're not a perfect amount. There's a lot more space here than there is on this side because this is higher and this is lower. So there's more space here than this side. That is going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to affect all of the tendons in the leg as well, because they are like rubber bands and they run around the outside of the leg. So a couple things to know, and I'm not picking on farriers. As a horse trainer, I personally love to pull on my right hand. I'm going to pull more and harder on my right hand than my left hand, and because I know that, I have to consciously make an effort pretty much every ride to remain balanced, remain in the center, keep the horse's head in the middle. So I'm not picking on farriers. We all have a dominant side, but a lot of times if you see the same side on both feet being higher or lower, then it's possible that there's more being taken off as they come from one side around to the other side of the foot. So something just to be aware of, or just, for that farrier as they look at these x-rays, to be able to say, I could maybe do a little better job, be a little more balanced, watch what I'm taking from one side or the other. So just something to keep in mind. So this picture is after this mare had gotten her shoes on, and it is significantly better. These I believe to be leather pads, and there's only two kind of pads that I really like. Leather would be my second choice, especially if you're going to try to wedge a horse. And the reason leather would be my second choice is because it is going to break down over time, especially if there's a heel pressure, like is in your low foot. So I will show you some pads in just a few minutes that I would prefer to use for a horse of this nature. I'm going to go ahead and look at the back angle view, which this is a really unclear photo, so I apologize. And it is leaning a little to the inside, and it could be that this is high. It does look a little bit high on this side, but also it looks like she may be leaning because I can see a little bit of a shadow more on this side than that side. But one of the things I want to point out that we do when we measure feet is we don't just measure what would be the normal thing to measure from here, the front of the hoof wall. But my farrier also measures from what would be the lowest part of the hairline to the bottom of the shoe, or to the ground, depending on whether or not they're shod. And that needs to be equal on both feet. As you can see by comparison, this one is first of all a lot more balanced, and maybe standing it looks like a lot more squarely. So when you take pictures of your feet, make sure that the leg is actually under the horse. But from this hairline to the concrete is significantly longer distance than from this hairline to the concrete. That is going to affect the degrees of palmar angle that you have, which is what we saw on the x-rays. So this is the low heel. Obviously there's very little heel. Like here's your frog right here, you can see it, and the heel is just almost in alignment with that, just barely. I would not wedge a horse without pads who has a low heel, because this is going to continue to fall through the center without something to support it. The frog's not going to continue to go up. It's going to continue to fall down. So you'll actually make your problem worse if you wedge them with, say, a 3-degree wedge shoe and no pad. You'll get the opposite of what you're actually looking for. I'm not really sure why this side was wedged. This would be the high side. I would probably not suggest wedging both sides equally if you already have an up-down problem, because you're actually then potentially going to put the high side too high, and that's going to be uncomfortable in the opposite direction. And it also is going to put a good bit of stress on your suspensories. Okay, so again, the thing that is most commonly measured is from here to here on the face of the hoof. But a very important measurement, and this is the high side being this left foot, is to measure from here to the ground, from that corner of the bulb to the ground, and making sure that those two things are equal. If you have one that's a few millimeters even higher or lower than the other, the horse is not going to travel square. They will be mechanically unsound. And another thing that it will tell you whether or not this point to the ground is the same is this line. This line, like the pastern access down through the hoof wall, is significantly different than this one. So if you pull it over to it, you can see that if I were to extend that down to the bottom, there's quite a bit of gap. Or if I take it and go this way, there's quite a bit of difference. So those are just some things to look at and for you to be aware of when actually trying to balance these horses, because they don't have one leg that's longer than the other. That's kind of a myth. Maybe one in 10,000 actually legitimately have one leg longer than the other. It's usually from the way that they eat especially as foals. If they are in the pasture and they're loading and unloading, continually walking, they generally won't have the up-down heels. But the minute you put them in a stall, if they have to eat off the ground, they're going to pick a dominant foot forward, and that is going to be your low heel. The other foot is going to be extended behind them and is going to be suspended. The heel is. It's going to crush that toe, and that heel is going to grow because it has more blood flow because it's suspended. And the foot in front, again, is going to crush that heel because most of the weight's going to run down the back of that leg and into that heel, the foot that's forward. So this is a picture of the blood flow that happens down into the horse's foot. And right, like this right here would be the hairline of the horse's foot. So if this is too low, you're going to be crimping all of these blood vessels here, and they can't actually make it all the way around. And that's why you'll see bruising in various parts of the front of the foot when the heel's too low. And you'll even get bruising sometimes at the bottom around the sole because it can't actually make it all the way around the foot as it is supposed to be able to. And that actually, there's a lot of nerve endings anytime that there's this much blood flow. So there is quite a bit of pain if this. So the area with the most pain when we're talking about a low heel is going to be the deep digital flexor tendon, which is this blue line that runs down all the way into the bottom of that foot. And it's responsible to lift this forward like that. That's your axis. And allow the heel to come up off the ground, the knee to bend forward, and it pulls all the way up into the shoulder actually. So when you have a horse who has a low heel and this starts to get really angry and really painful, and especially if it's a young horse and has just a little bit of shake to the knee or a little bit tight in the back of that leg, the pain is not just going to be here. It's going to run the length of the leg all the way down here from this deep flexor tendon, and then legitimately all the way up through the leg and into both sides of the shoulder. And you'll have pleasure horse, the low heel, if you push almost right in front of right where your cinch on your saddle hooks up, there'll be a muscle right there. If that is painful, if they're ouchy when you push on that and rub on it, then you know you have some deep flexor tendon strains, at least some drama going on there. This is a really great picture because this depicts the deep flexor tendon. It shows just how wide an area where that hooks up down there that covers. And again, this red one is the deep flexor tendon hooking up down there. So with that blood flow down there and all of the nerve endings that are down there, if this gets angry, it's going to be angry. It's going to swell and it's going to be angry for some time. And as this swells, it's going to push out on these superficial flexor tendons, which then both of them are going to be angry and in pain. And the superficial is this green one running through here. And there is a tendon sheath, a flexor tendon sheath right here. It's in green. And that holds those together and tightly against the leg, and it protects them. It's very, very strong. It doesn't have much give. So if these flexor tendons, this deep digital and this superficial, if they get angry or inflamed, they are going to swell. But this deep flexor tendon sheath is not going to allow them to expand very much. So they're just going to swell within and next to each other. And then what's going to happen is you're going to see tripping. There'll be like a lockup of the leg, because you would be shocked how much these two actually have to move back and forth, how much flexion there actually is, how much slide they have to have in order to maintain the motion of the leg. Again, when I look at an x-ray, I'm just going to go back to see this again. When I look at an x-ray, one of the things that I look for in the low heel is, can I see that deep flexor? Is it angry enough that on the x-ray I actually can see it? So on the left one, you can see it a little bit. It's not nearly as apparent to me, and it's a much better angle coming up out of there. You don't want those to be at a 90-degree angle where they hook up down here into this area like that right one is. You know, it's coming down, and it's a pretty hard angle to get under this. That's a pretty good turn right here. It's not quite 90 degrees, but it's pretty close as compared to that kind of smooth hookup line right there. So those are some things to really be aware of. and why horses with low heels really struggle. And the next one, this is a 2-year-old that's getting ready to have shoes on for the first time. And this is what I'm looking at. This is the left front, and this is the right front. My right front is my low heel. I think we're going to be about 2-degree difference is my guess. I am going to look at the front of the face of the hoof as well on both sides. And keeping in mind the difference, because I'm going to lift the low one approximately 2 degrees, and then I'm going to have even feet front and back. And this one I'm showing just to show what can happen if left for too long. Where that circle is actually a break in the top of that bone from that heel being too low over time. And as you can see on the other side of this particular horse, there's a lot of roughness at that same area where that break was on the first one. And that is a result of having too low heels over a period of time while being asked to have a top line at the same time. And then going back to the first foot, you can see how negative this palmar angle is. But also in green, I put what I would want to see, where that toe, I would like to see that toe end. And then the blue is what I would like to see taken off. And that will actually help to lower and level that palmar angle without doing a whole lot else. This horse is obviously going to need probably a wedge in order to get to a positive angle. But I think you could get to almost a flat angle. And if the horse is just being a pasture horse, this isn't going to be a problem, or a trail riding horse. But if you are going to add a top line, it's going to add more stress between that digital flexor tendon where it hooks up at the bottom and at the shoulder where it hooks up in the shoulder. So I hope that is helpful to someone. If you do have a horse with up-down feet and you would just like some recommendations, please feel free to send me video and x-rays, and I'd be happy to speak with your farrier. I've worked with lots of farriers over the years, and they're wonderful people and definitely want your horse to be comfortable. And so just a little bit of insight sometimes is very helpful, especially in understanding what we're asking of the horse. If these were trail riding horses who are loping around with their head up in a comfortable position on the dominant lead that was comfortable to them, if they were able to choose that all the time, then we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. But if you're going to have a pleasure horse or a hunt seat horse expected to carry its head 15% below the withers or more and lope the same on both leads and be comfortable doing it, then some maintenance is going to be required, and that may just look like 3D pads from Wellshod. I prefer a flat shoe with a wedge pad, and I like the 3D pads because they support the frog and push the frog up, and so there's a pumping action that happens when they hit the ground that increases the natural blood flow. We use DIM 20, Dental Impression Material 20, as cushion between the pad and the frog, and that just helps to keep things out of it. It's like lovely tennis shoe-ish rubber, and consistency when it's dried, it doesn't get greasy or gooey, so it's kind of my favorite. And I prefer a flat shoe because when they're moving through sand, they're going to sink to the flat plane, and you want that flat plane to actually be the pad, not the bottom of the foot. Without a pad, they will fall through the bars. Their frog will distend down through the bars, and then you have actually a much bigger problem than you have now, and the palmar angle will not come up. The other thing that I suggest is MagnaWave, lithotripsy, shockwave, something like that to help to increase the electrical impulse, blood flow, and to decrease inflammation if you do have one that's uncomfortable. And once they are more comfortable, as far as the angles have been addressed, they are reshod, and you know that you're good, then I also suggest injecting that carpal canal, because that will really alleviate the carpal tunnel, and we have a recipe for that. So please reach out to me, because I've experimented over the last 25 years to put together the recipe that's actually extremely effective. So don't hesitate to ask me about that. And then lastly, of course, my suggestion to her was to put the horse on joint SOS with painless, because the inflammation within the joint isn't just in the joint and isn't just only in the foot. Those tendons need some anti-inflammatories and MSM in order to regain the elasticity that they need, so that the tripping and the buckling will stop. So I hope that helps. Have a blessed day.